The lecture hall buzzed with the usual sounds of academy life. Young beings from across the galaxy sat in their cushioned pods, floating chairs, and suspension fields. Professor Velnath stood at the front of the massive chamber, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he discussed the fundamental forces of the universe. He was a Kelvari, a species known throughout the Galactic Union for their brilliant minds and fragile bodies. Like most civilized races, the Kelvari had evolved on a low-gravity world where the gentle pull allowed for tall, elegant forms and efficient biological systems. Today's topic was gravitational tolerance in biological life, a subject every first-year student needed to understand before they could travel between worlds safely. And so, Professor Velnath continued, and his voice carrying through the translation devices everyone wore. We arrive at the critical threshold, one standard gravity unit, the point at which complex biological life becomes impractical. He pulled up a holographic display showing various life forms and their gravity ratings, most clustered between 0.3 and 0.7 standard units. A few hardy species pushed up to 0.85. At one full standard unit, the professor explained, tapping the hologram, the energy cost becomes prohibitive. Just standing upright would consume enormous resources. The heart, or equivalent organ, must work constantly against the crushing weight. Bones must be thick and heavy, making movement costly. Blood pressure creates dangerous strain on vessels. The spine compresses under its own mass. A student near the front raised a tentacle. But, Professor, surely some life could adapt. Velnath shook his primary head. Simple organisms, perhaps. Microbes, some plants. But intelligent, complex life? The biological cost is simply too great. You would need a cardiovascular system of incredible efficiency, a skeletal structure both strong and light, muscles that could move such heavy bones while fighting constant gravitational drain. The brain itself would struggle, pulled downward, blood pooling in the lower regions. He brought up another display, this one showing theoretical models. Evolution is efficient. It does not waste energy. Any species trying to develop intelligence under one standard gravity would be outcompeted by simpler forms. They would need to eat constantly just to fuel basic movement. Their young would be vulnerable, unable to escape predators while developing. The mathematics are clear. The class murmured in agreement. It made sense. Everyone present came from worlds of reasonable gravity. The very idea of one full standard unit seemed absurd, like trying to swim through stone. In fact, Velnath added with academic certainty, our surveys have confirmed this. Of the 17,000 worlds we have cataloged, not a single one with surface gravity above 0.9 units has produced complex life. It is simply impossible. That was when the door at the back of the lecture hall opened. The sound itself was wrong. Too heavy. Most species used sliding doors or energy fields. This was a mechanical thing, and it moved with disturbing weight. Every head, a sensor, and optical organ turned to look. A figure stood in the doorway. Bipedal. Roughly 2 meters tall. It wore no suspension field, no gravity compensator, no support structure of any kind. Just simple fabric clothing and what appeared to be some kind of bag slung over one shoulder. The being walked into the room, and the sound of each footstep seemed impossibly loud. Not from volume, but from the weight they implied. This creature was just walking. Walking like it was nothing. Walking under the standard 1.0 gravity the Academy maintained in this particular hall for physics demonstrations. Several students gasped. A few activated their medical monitors, certain they were hallucinating. One Threxian actually fainted, though whether from shock or because their gravity pod malfunctioned was unclear. And the being walked down the central aisle, moving with a strange fluid grace that should not have been possible. It was carrying its own mass, bones that could support that weight, muscles that could move it, a cardiovascular system that was functioning perfectly, apparently without strain. Professor Velnath stood frozen, all four arms hanging limp. His translator was making small, confused noises, unable to process what his eyes were seeing versus what his mind knew to be true. The being reached the front of the class and looked up at the professor. It had two forward-facing eyes, a bilateral symmetry, hair growing from the top of its head. It smiled, showing small, flat teeth that suggested an omnivorous diet. "Sorry I am late," the being said in perfect galactic standard. "Traffic was terrible. I am Marcus Chen, the new exchange student from Earth. I believe I am supposed to attend this class?" The silence that followed was absolute. Somewhere in the back, a support cushion deflated with a sad wheeze. "Earth?" Velnath finally managed. "Earth is... what classification?" Marcus pulled out a small device and checked it. According to this, surface gravity is 1.0 standard units. Is that right? I never really thought about it before. We just call it 1G. 1.0. The words hung in the air like an accusation. The impossible number, the threshold of death for complex life. "But that is," a student whispered. "That is what the professor just said was impossible." Marcus looked around the room, finally noticing that every other being was in some kind of support system. Floating chairs, suspension fields, gravity compensators, cushioned pods. He appeared confused. "Oh," he said, understanding dawning. "You guys are all from low-gravity worlds. That makes sense. The coordinator did mention something about that, but I thought she meant you just preferred lower gravity, not that you needed it." He gestured at his own body. "We evolved in 1G. It is just normal for us." "Normal?" Professor Velnath's voice cracked slightly. "You are saying your species evolved under one standard gravity? Developed intelligence? Built a civilization? Under conditions that should have made complex life impossible?" "Well, yeah." Marcus shrugged, and the class watched in fascination as his shoulder muscles moved mass that should have been immovable. "I mean, is it really that weird? We have been at it for a few million years at least." A plenary student activated her holo recorder, already imagining the academic paper. A Voth in the back was recalculating every assumption about biological limitations. Two Zithians were quietly having an existential crisis. Professor Velnath slowly moved to his teaching podium, mostly to have something to hold on to. His carefully constructed lecture about the biological impossibility of high-gravity life was now being contradicted by a smiling biped who was just standing there. Just standing. Like it was easy. "Please," Velnath said weakly, "sit down. There is a suspension chair at the back that should accommodate your frame." Marcus looked at the offered chair, then at the regular metal bench nearby. "Actually, if you do not mind, I will just use this regular one. The suspension chairs make me feel a bit weird, like I am floating when I should not be." He sat down on the metal bench. The simple act of controlled descent, of muscles lowering mass precisely through gravitational pull, seemed to mesmerize the entire class. He was not falling, he was not struggling, he was just sitting. And then he crossed his legs, lifted one limb entirely off the ground, and balanced it on the other knee. Casual, comfortable. The energy cost alone should have been staggering, yet he sat there looking perfectly relaxed. "So," Marcus said brightly, pulling out a datapad from his bag, "what did I miss?" Professor Velnath looked at his lecture notes, at his carefully prepared slides about the impossibility of 1G life, at his mathematical proofs of biological limitations, at 17,000 worlds of survey data that said complex life could not exist above 0.9 gravity. Then he looked at Marcus Chen, who was sitting there waiting patiently for class to continue, completely unaware that his mere existence was rewriting everything the galaxy thought it knew about life. I think, Velnath said slowly, we need to revise the curriculum. The next 3 hours were unlike any class session in the Academy's history. Professor Velnath had completely abandoned his prepared lecture. Instead, he found himself conducting an impromptu examination of the impossible being sitting calmly in the third row. You said you evolved in this gravity? The professor asked, still struggling to keep his voice steady. Your entire evolutionary history? Marcus nodded. As far as we can tell, our Earth has been at 1G for billions of years. Our earliest ancestors, the little fish things that crawled out of the ocean, they dealt with it. The dinosaurs handled it fine. We came after them. Dinosaurs? A student squeaked. Big reptiles. Some of them were massive, like 20 meters long, weighing dozens of tons. They walked around on Earth just fine. Marcus said it so casually as if he was describing something ordinary. The class sat in stunned silence. 20 meters, dozens of tons, in 1G gravity. The largest land creature in the known galaxy was a Bronthar, and it topped out at 3 tons on its native 0.4G world. It needed mechanical assistance to move in anything higher. Show us, Velnath said suddenly. Show us how you move. Marcus looked uncertain. What do you mean? Stand up, walk. Demonstrate your range of motion, please. For science. Marcus stood, and again that fluid motion drew every eye in the room. He walked to the front of the class. His gait was steady, balanced. Each foot lifted completely off the ground, arms swinging naturally. No strain visible anywhere. Okay, I can do this. He bent down and touched his toes, straightened up, did a few jumping jacks. Jumping, he was jumping, launching his entire mass upward against 1G of gravity and landing safely. Multiple times. The energy expenditure alone should have exhausted him immediately, yet his breathing barely increased. A medical student activated a scanner, hands trembling. The readings came back. Heart rate, elevated but stable. Oxygen consumption, within normal ranges for light exercise. Muscle strain, minimal. Blood pressure, actually healthy. It was impossible. It was happening right in front of them. Your bones, Velnath said, pulling up a medical scanner. May I scan your skeletal structure? Sure, go ahead. The holographic image appeared, and the class gasped collectively. The human skeleton was dense, incredibly dense, bones thick and solid, designed to support weight that would crush most species. The spine, a vertical column bearing the entire upper body mass. The leg bones, massive pillars of calcium and minerals. By the void, a biology student whispered. The density, it must weigh. About 15% of my total body weight is just skeleton, Marcus offered helpfully. Is that unusual? Unusual. Most species managed with skeletal structures comprising 5 to 8% of body mass. 15% was almost unthinkable, yet the sheer resources needed to build and maintain that much bone. And your cardiovascular system, Velnath continued, fascinated despite himself. How does it handle the gravitational stress? Marcus thought about it. Well, our hearts are pretty strong. They pump about 5 liters of blood per minute at rest, more when we exercise. The blood vessels are reinforced to handle the pressure. We have these things called valves in our veins that prevent backflow when blood is fighting gravity to return to the heart. The medical student who had been scanning him pulled up the data. The human heart was a muscular powerhouse, built like a hydraulic pump designed for high-pressure systems. Its efficiency was remarkable. Every beat pushed blood through a body fighting constant gravitational pull, and it did this 60 to 70 times per minute, at rest, for decades. This is fascinating, a xenobiology professor who had entered the room mid-demonstration said. She was a Quilnar, barely holding herself upright even in her suspension field. The muscle density alone. May I ask, what can you lift? Marcus shrugged. I am not particularly athletic, but I can pick up maybe 20 kilos without much trouble. My friend Jake back home competes in something called powerlifting. He can lift over 200 kilos above his head. 200 kilograms, in 1 g above his head, fighting gravity the entire time. The strongest Quilnar could manage perhaps 30 kilos in 0.6 g, and that was considered exceptional. Numbers started appearing on holopads across the room as students began calculating power-to-weight ratios. The energy expenditure, structural tolerances, each calculation revealed another impossible aspect of human biology. "Your planet," Velnath said quietly. "Tell us about Earth. If it is truly 1 g, the conditions must be—" "Pretty nice, actually," Marcus said. "We have oceans, mountains, forests, deserts. Weather can be intense sometimes. We get hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes. The atmosphere is about 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen. Temperature ranges from way below freezing to extremely hot depending on where you are." He paused, noticing their expressions. "Is that bad?" "Bad?" The Quilnar professor laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Young human, you just described a death world. High gravity, violent weather, extreme temperature variance, and 21% oxygen is borderline toxic to most species. Your world should not have complex life. It certainly should not have produced an industrial civilization." Marcus blinked. "Death world? We just call it Earth. I mean, yeah, nature can be dangerous, but we have cities and farms and schools, billions of people. It is home." The term was spreading through the class now. Death world. The students were looking at Marcus with new eyes, not just as an impossible biological specimen, but as something that had crawled up from conditions that should have prevented life entirely. And he was just standing there, smiling, breathing toxic air levels, supporting his own weight, existing. By the time the class ended, word had spread throughout the academy. Students from other lectures abandoned their studies to crowd around the observation windows of the physics hall. Faculty members made excuses to pass by. The human from the death world had become an instant phenomenon. Marcus Chen, for his part, seemed bemused by all the attention. He had tried to leave for his next class, but a crowd of researchers had politely but firmly requested he submit to further examination. Being a good-natured person and genuinely curious about the scientific process, he agreed. Now he sat in the Academy's medical research facility, surrounded by the finest scientific minds of a dozen species, all of whom were looking at him like he was the most valuable research specimen in the galaxy, which, to be fair, he probably was. "If you do not mind," Dr. Yennick said, adjusting her optical sensors. "Oh, we would like to conduct a stress test. Nothing dangerous. We simply want to understand your physical capabilities." Marcus nodded. "Sure. What do you need me to do?" They led him to a testing chamber where various exercise equipment had been hastily assembled. Most of it was designed for low-gravity species and looked absurdly delicate to Marcus, but they had found a few pieces that might work. "First, we will measure your baseline movement. Please walk across the room at your normal pace." Marcus walked. The sensors went crazy. Every researcher in the room was taking notes. The way his muscles coordinated, the efficiency of his gait, the fact that he could do this for hours without tiring. "Now please run." Marcus jogged across the room, not even a full sprint, just a light jog. But the impact sensors embedded in the floor measured the force of each footfall. The numbers made the engineers recalibrate their equipment twice, certain it was malfunctioning. Each step hit with multiple times his body weight in force. The kinetic energy of his movement would have shattered the legs of most species. His bones absorbed it. His joints handled it. His muscles used it to propel forward into the next stride. "Remarkable," Professor Velnath muttered, reviewing the data. "The structural resilience alone. And this is normal for your species?" "Yeah, most humans can run. Some are way better at it than me. We used to hunt by chasing animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. Persistence hunting, we called it. We are not fast compared to most prey, but we can keep going when they cannot. The concept seemed to horrify the researchers, chasing prey to exhaustion. In 1G gravity, the energy cost would be staggering. The fact that it was an effective hunting strategy suggested something terrifying about human endurance. "What about your environmental tolerances?" Dr. Yenix asked. "You mentioned temperature extremes on your world." Marcus considered. "Humans live pretty much everywhere on Earth. Arctic regions where it gets down to -40 degrees, deserts where it hits 50 degrees Celsius. We have cities in mountains, on coasts, in jungles. We adapt pretty well." "-40 to +50? A voice squeaked from the back. "That is a 90-degree operational range." Most species had comfortable temperature ranges of maybe 10 to 15 degrees. Some hardy ones pushed 20. At 90 degrees was unthinkable. Yet humans did not just survive it. They built thriving civilizations across that entire spectrum. "And the oxygen," another researcher added. 21%. How do you not suffer from oxygen toxicity?" Marcus shrugged. "That is just our atmosphere. We breathe it our whole lives. I guess we evolved to handle it." The researchers exchanged glances. Evolved to handle it. Like it was simple. Like adapting to toxic oxygen levels and crushing gravity and extreme temperatures was just a minor evolutionary adjustment. "There is something else," Professor Velnath said slowly, looking at the medical scans. "Your healing rate. You mentioned you injured yourself recently?" "Oh yeah, I sprained my ankle a few weeks back, playing football. It is fine now, though." "A sprain is a ligament injury, correct? And then it healed in weeks?" "About 3 weeks, yeah. It was not that bad." The medical staff looked disturbed. Ligament injuries in most species took months to heal, often requiring surgical intervention. 3 weeks for natural healing was absurdly fast. The human body was not just tough, it was apparently designed to repair itself quickly, which made sense, a biology student realized. On a death world, in high gravity, with dangerous predators and volatile weather, healing fast was not a luxury. It was survival. "Tell us about these predators," Velnath asked. "What kind of threats did humanity face during its evolution?" Marcus pulled out his datapad and started showing images. Large cats with knife-like teeth, massive bears, crocodiles, sharks, venomous snakes and spiders, pack-hunting wolves. Each image prompted new reactions of shock. "And these creatures were enormous, powerful, designed to kill, and they had all evolved in 1G gravity, which meant they could move fast and strike hard." "And humans survived this how?" Dr. Yenix asked. "Tools mostly, weapons, fire, working together in groups. We are not the strongest or fastest, but we are smart and persistent. Also, we can throw things really accurately, which helps." "Throw things?" Marcus picked up a small medical instrument from a nearby table. "Like this. See that target across the room?" He gestured at a display panel about 10 meters away. Before anyone could object, he threw the instrument. It sailed through the air in a perfect arc and struck the panel dead center with a solid thunk. The throw had been casual, effortless. The accuracy was remarkable. The researchers stared. Most species could throw things. Technically, but not with that kind of power and precision. The shoulder joint required for that kind of motion. The hand-eye coordination, the ability to calculate trajectory and force in a split second. "Your species weaponized projectiles," a military consultant who had joined the group said quietly. "Developed the ability to kill at range using nothing but muscle power and calculation. Well, we also developed bows and arrows, spears, eventually guns and missiles. But yeah, throwing rocks at things that wanted to eat us was probably one of our first survival tactics." The implications were sinking in. Humans had not just survived a death world. They had conquered it. They had looked at a planet that should have crushed them and said no. They had faced predators that should have eaten them and learned to fight back. And they had dealt with environmental extremes that should have killed them and built cities anyway. And now they were here, in space, among species that had evolved in gentle, low-gravity comfort, species that needed assistance just to move around in 1G. "How many of you are there?" someone asked quietly. "How many humans?" Marcus checked his datapad. "Last I heard, about 8 billion on Earth, plus a few million in our off-world colonies. We have been expanding into space for about a century now. 8 billion. The researchers did the math silently. 8 billion apex predators from a death world, all of them capable of moving in 1G, all of them adapted to environmental extremes, all of them with that disturbing ability to just keep going." Professor Velnath was the first to speak. "Mr. Chen, I believe I speak for everyone here when I say that your presence has fundamentally changed our understanding of what is possible in biology. Your species represents a paradigm shift in everything we thought we knew about life and evolution." Marcus smiled, slightly embarrassed. "I mean, we are just people. We eat, sleep, laugh, love. We have families and jobs and hobbies. We watch movies and play games. We are not that different from you guys. You do all that in one standard gravity," Dr. Yenix pointed out. "That alone makes you very different." "I guess." Marcus stood up, demonstrating once again that casual defiance of physics that so fascinated them. "Look, I appreciate all the interest, but I really should get to my next class. I am taking Introduction to Galactic History, and I do not want to be late again." He picked up his bag, been slinging it over one shoulder with ease despite its mass. The researchers watched him walk to the door, each step a reminder that everything they had believed about biological limitations was wrong. At the doorway, Marcus paused and turned back. "Oh, one thing, though. If Earth is really that unusual, you should probably know that we are not the only tough species there. We share the planet with all kinds of life. Whales that weigh 100 tons, elephants with thick skin and tusks, plants that grow 50 meters tall, insects that can lift many times their own weight. If you think I am impressive, you should see what else 1G gravity produces." And then he left, leaving behind a room full of scientists who were already planning expeditions to Earth, cataloging missions, exchange programs. They needed to see this death world. And they needed to understand how life could be so resilient, so adaptable, so stubbornly persistent in the face of crushing gravity. Professor Velnath looked at his notes from this morning's lecture, the careful mathematical proofs, the survey data, the certainty that complex life could not exist above 0.9G. He deleted it all, started a new file, titled it Revised Theories on Gravitational Tolerance in Biological Systems, the Human Exception. Except as he wrote, he realized it was not an exception. It was evidence. Evidence that life was more tenacious than they had imagined, that evolution could solve problems they thought were unsolvable, that the universe was bigger and stranger and more wonderful than their surveys had suggested. Somewhere in the academy, Marcus Chen was walking to his next class, just walking, like it was the easiest thing in the world, and for him, it was. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Union Science Council held an emergency session. The topic was humanity and Earth. By then, the initial shock had worn off, replaced by systematic scientific inquiry and, in some quarters, mild panic. The council chamber was packed. Representatives from hundreds of worlds had come to hear the findings. At the center of it all, Marcus Chen sat somewhat uncomfortably in a specially designed chair, having politely declined the offered suspension field. Professor Velnath stood at the podium, presenting his revised research. Behind him, holographic displays showed Earth, that beautiful blue and green marble that should not have existed. "To summarize our findings," Velnath said, his voice steady now, The Earth represents a Class 12 death world by our current classification standards. Surface gravity of 1.0 standard units. Atmospheric oxygen at 21%. Temperature variance of over 100 degrees across different regions. Active geology causing frequent earthquakes and volcanic activity. Weather systems of extraordinary violence including hurricanes, tornadoes, and monsoons. He paused, letting that sink in. And yet, life thrives there. Not simple life, not bacteria clinging to existence, but complex, diverse, abundant life. Millions of species occupying every niche. An ecosystem of remarkable resilience. The displays changed, showing Earth's biodiversity. Forests, oceans, savannas. The sheer abundance was overwhelming. The human species itself represents perhaps the most successful organism we have encountered. 8 billion individuals, global distribution, tool-using, highly intelligent, capable of long-term planning and complex abstract thought. They have developed mathematics, art, philosophy, and advanced technology, all while dealing with conditions we previously considered incompatible with higher cognition. A counselor raised a tentacle. But surely they must have limitations, weaknesses? Velnath nodded. Of course. Humans require approximately 8 hours of unconsciousness per day cycle for neural maintenance, what they call sleep. They must consume food regularly as their high-energy lifestyle creates constant nutritional demands. Their soft tissue is vulnerable to cutting and piercing damage, though their healing factor compensates remarkably well. They have difficulty surviving in environments outside their temperature tolerance without technological assistance. He brought up another display. However, these limitations are offset by their strengths. Exceptional endurance, high strength-to-body mass ratio, remarkable adaptability, advanced problem-solving, and perhaps most importantly, strong social bonds and cooperative behavior. Marcus, listening to himself being described like a specimen, tried not to laugh. It was surreal hearing someone analyze humanity as if they were discovering a new species. Mr. Chen, a counselor, addressed him directly. Your species has only recently achieved faster-than-light travel, correct? Yes, about 20 years ago. We had been doing slower-than-light exploration before that. Oh, but FTL opened up a lot of possibilities. And in that time, you have established how many colonies? Last count was 37 settled worlds, plus about 200 research outposts and mining operations. The number caused murmuring throughout the chamber. 37 worlds in 20 years. Most species took centuries to expand that far. But then, most species did not have 8 billion motivated individuals looking for room to grow. What gravity ranges do these colonies cover? Another counselor asked. Marcus consulted his datapad. From about 0.6 G up to 1.2 G. We prefer worlds similar to Earth, but we can adapt to a fairly wide range. Below 0.6, we start having long-term health issues. Above 1.2 gets exhausting to live in full time. 0.6 to 1.2, the range that covered almost 90% of death worlds in the known galaxy. Worlds that every other species avoided. Worlds with too much gravity, too much oxygen, too much environmental danger. To humans, they were real estate. This council must address the implications, the head counselor said seriously. The humans represent not just a new species, but a new category of species. They occupy an environmental niche we thought was empty. We mean them no harm, another added quickly, seeing Marcus's expression. But we must understand our new neighbors, your capabilities, your needs, your intentions. Marcus stood, and the simple act still drew eyes. Our intentions are the same as any species, I think. We want to explore, learn, build homes, raise families, maybe do some trade. We are not looking to conquer anyone or anything. We have enough challenges managing ourselves. He looked around the chamber at the hundreds of species represented there. Earth taught us a lot of things. It taught us to be tough, yeah, but it also taught us to cooperate, to help each other, Because on a world that is constantly trying to kill you, you need your neighbors. You need community. You need friends. He smiled. So that is what we are looking for out here. Friends, partners, people to share ideas with. And honestly, this has been amazing. Learning about all your worlds, your cultures, your sciences. You have things we never imagined. We have things you never thought possible. Together, we can probably figure out a lot. The chamber was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, the head counselor stood. It was a gesture of respect. Say, though, standing in 0.4G was far easier than what Marcus did every day. Then let us be friends, the counselor said. Let us learn from each other, and perhaps with time, you can teach us what else is possible, what other assumptions we have made that might be wrong. Marcus grinned. Deal. Though fair warning, once you start questioning assumptions, humans tend to get really enthusiastic about it. We have this saying, the impossible just takes a little longer. Later, much later, Professor Velnath would write the definitive textbook on Death World biology. It would revolutionize xenobiology and lead to new survey missions to planets previously dismissed as uninhabitable. They would find life on 6 more death worlds, none quite like Earth, none that had produced spacefaring civilizations. But life nonetheless, clinging to existence in conditions thought impossible. Each discovery proving that the universe was more resilient than anyone had imagined. Marcus Chen would become something of a celebrity, the human who broke physics just by existing. He handled it with good humor and patience, answering endless questions about Earth and humanity. But his favorite moments were the simple ones, walking through the academy gardens with friends from a dozen different worlds, sharing meals in the cafeteria, late-night study sessions where everyone struggled with the same impossible homework, gravity irrelevant to the universal challenge of higher education. Because in the end, that was the real lesson Earth had taught humanity, not just how to survive in high gravity, but how to find joy and connection and meaning regardless of the weight pressing down on you. How to look at an impossible situation and say, okay, but what if we tried anyway? And then, one step at a time, to prove that impossible was just another word for not yet achieved. Marcus stood in the garden one evening looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Home. 1G of gravity pulling everything downward with relentless force. 8 billion humans going about their lives, completely unaware that their mere existence had rewritten alien textbooks. He felt the familiar tug of the Academy's artificial gravity, one standard unit, what the professor had called impossible, what every human on Earth dealt with every single day without thinking about it. Marcus smiled and headed back inside. He had homework to do, friends to meet, and a whole galaxy to explore, all of it waiting for him, one step at a time.